Good afternoon and welcome to the AccountingWEB Software Satisfaction Awards for 2013. I'm the Deputy Editor on AccountingWEB, Robert Lovell. Today we're going to be discussing the shortlisted candidates for the payroll category of the awards. And AccountingWEB will later on reveal the winners after this video, but only after the 7th of November. BrightPay, Sage 50, Sage Instant, MoneySoft, Iris, Big Red Book, the Payroll Site, and QuickBooks.
Yes, I guess it is. Probably BrightPay has come out of nowhere and registered a huge vote. We had 38% of the sample in this category. That's very significant. I was also talking to Paul Rains, who's the director of Transact HR, and he's the vice chairman of the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals. And he pointed out, as anyone else would see, that almost all those nominees, apart from the payroll site, are traditional payroll software. We have a few. There's a few others in the undergrowth, but the payroll site was a category winner last year, so it's good to see them in there this year. But slightly surprising that there aren't more cloud players, particularly after the year we've had in payroll.
How do you think the shortlist reflects the impact of cloud computing on payroll software?
I think the wider market, payroll is one of those areas where, in the small business sphere, it's certainly catching on, and particularly there's RTI, I think, has chased a lot of people into payroll, but also within the more professional community, there is a lot of reluctance to put such sensitive information on the cloud. So, in the way that accountants and their own practice data with people's tax and income information, they're quite reluctant, or have always traditionally mistrusted cloud. I think that culture exists a little bit in the payroll world too, but with payroll site, Iris has got open payroll now. That's beginning to happen. And again, when I talked to Paul Rains, he was the one who told me, he's got the sense there still was some reluctance, but he thinks just the advantages of not having to maintain your IT and that actually the security is probably more reliable in the cloud than on a server in the back of your office. So he thinks it's definitely the way that the profession is going to go.
Are there any companies that you would expect to see here this year, but you don't?
There's a few people lurking in the undergrowth. 12Pay Payroll, they're quite active members of AccountingWEB. They were part of our quite a big chunk of our membership last year. So we have a different setup how we ran the survey. So 12Pay kind of receded in that. Iris is there with the main Iris payroll, but Ernie, that showed up on that had its own category, and I guess it's a bigger, more corporate system and longer established, so that didn't make it through in its own right. But Iris certainly has several portions of that market. I think Sage is in there. We didn't see Sage 1. That's an online one, so I would have expected to see that last year. And I think, like Paul, I expect to see a much bigger cloud representation in the years to come.
You mentioned RTI earlier. What's been the impact of RTI on the market? And do you think there were any obvious winners or losers from this transition?
Paul Rains at the CIPP. He said he called RTI really something that was very good for the payroll profession. I mean, I think the accountants certainly might question that view of his, but it sold a lot of software, and from what our sample of BrightPay suggests, is it sold a lot of very cheap software. So basically people who were maybe using spreadsheets or backs of envelopes in previous years were forced to buy software with RTI. And one explanation for BrightPay having such a large proportion of the vote is that if you have less than 3 employees, you can use it for free. And the payroll site, they're not free, but for up to 5 employees, you can pay £5 a month. So it's made it a real mass movement and sold a lot of software. So those two in particular, I think, have benefited. But you'll find that some of the more established payroll software providers have probably prospered quite well as well. And it will be down to when we reveal which is the winner, who may have perhaps bagged the happiest clients and done the best to satisfy that new generation of users.
Great, thanks John. Well, that concludes our session today. You can tune in for more updates and information about the awards on AccountingWEB after the 7th of November. Thank you.